Hey guys, Sean here, and I have something to say about Ferrari and really more specifically the comments made by John Elkann since Brazil. Now, it is so hard being a Ferrari fan at times, and this season has felt like an absolute slog. Every time things look like they're turning a corner and the team looks to be back on the right path, it all falls apart. A statement perhaps I could have used for about a decade, probably more. And it's the same old, isn't it? Poor results thanks to an inconsistent car, questionable strategy calls, and an apparent lack of unity behind the scenes. Last season, despite all the ups and downs, Ferrari narrowly missed out on the Constructors' Championship, so with the impending arrival of Lewis Hamilton to add to their strong end to 2024, hopes were high. Yet, here we are again, one step forward and two steps back, or so it seems. And this week, that apparent lack of unity I touched on went public with Executive Chairman John Elkann stating that last weekend's race in Brazil had been a big disappointment, and even added that looking at this season, and I will quote him in full here, on one hand we have our mechanics who are basically winning the championship with their performance and everything that has been done on the pit stops. If we look at our engineers, there is no doubt that the car has improved. If we look at the rest, it is not up to par, and surely we have drivers for whom it is important that they focus on driving and talk less, because we still have important races ahead of us and getting second place is not impossible. Yes, that's right, the drivers in the most simplistic of terms need to shut up and get on with it. That is the message, or dare I say warning here. But here's the thing, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton both have every right to be frustrated because despite whatever pretty picture Elkann is trying to paint, we know things are far from rosy. That quote reads like it's from a man who hasn't watched much of this season at all. It is true that Ferrari's mechanics have done a good job when it comes to pit stops. After all, they are right at the top of the pit stop championship and fairly comfortably too, if you care, so I will give him that. However, his comment about the car improving is so far wide of the mark. Maybe from his side, the numbers, the data, whatever you want to call it, all says that it is doing that, but performance improvement is relative to your rivals and Ferrari are not seemingly taking the steps forward they need to. Not to mention the fact that back in China, Hamilton won the sprint but was disqualified from the race due to excessive plank wear. That was round 2 of the season and Brazil was round 21. Yet, the car has allegedly improved so much that it is still massively inconsistent to the point that drivers are having to LICO, lift and coast, throughout the races. Of course, lifting and coasting is an important part of F1 strategy, so the fact they have to do this is not odd or uncommon. However, having to do it for sometimes as much as the whole race is very unusual, but they have to do it to help protect the floor from excessive wear, so yeah, great job improving the car there. The big mid-season update, which focused on the ride height issues and included changes to the floor and the rear suspension, failed to offer much, if anything, in the way of improvements as well. And to put it mildly, the team have been up and down all year. One weekend they look like they're in the fight for a podium and maybe even a surprise win. The next, both cars are struggling to get out of Q2 in qualifying. Again, hardly signs of an improving car. So for him to take aim at the drivers like that is a little bit surprising, especially given that neither driver said anything controversial or even detrimental to the team post-race in Brazil, so the timing of this feels really odd. And Charles Leclerc, as I said over on the other channel in the summer, has had a bit of an under-the-radar season. It hasn't been the greatest season of all time, nobody is claiming that, but he's been doing all he can to drag that car to good results whilst having to deal with the LICO situation as well as the usual indecision on the pit wall and the car's other limitations. So for him to come under fire was surprising because whilst Hamilton has struggled, Leclerc has for the most part been someone the team can really count on. I mean, look at the season to this point. Without Leclerc's performances and results, the 2025 campaign would have been a complete disaster. So with him giving his everything and having to deal with the car's problems, is it any wonder he's frustrated and making his feelings clear? After all, for Charles, this isn't a one-season thing. Whilst he's made many mistakes himself since moving to Ferrari, he's also been let down time and time again by the team. So he's likely had enough, and who can blame him for speaking out? I am not going to criticise either driver for speaking out, and certainly not Charles. I'm just surprised it's taken this long. As for Hamilton, so much was expected of his first season at Ferrari, but it really hasn't worked out at all. He's had to settle into a new team, a team with a completely different culture to any other on the grid, and get to grips with a car he had no say on when it came to development. There was always going to be a learning curve, even for a driver of Hamilton's experience and talent, but I don't think many expected it to still be this bad come the final few races of the season. And that's all a two-way street, by the way. Ferrari has to get used to working with Lewis too, and we know there has been a lot of talk behind the scenes between him and the engineers, and that's inevitably going to cause friction, and that will take time to adjust to. But although it is only his first year with them and next season will be the biggest test, I don't think it's unreasonable to say again that as of now and for whatever reason, it just hasn't worked. I'm sure many will say, well, the team weren't in this state when Carlos Sainz was there, and yeah, you're right to a point. But a lot of the indecisiveness and poor calls we're talking about now were, as were the ups and downs in car performance, plus he didn't have to deal with this season's major ride height issues, so it's not exactly a like-for-like comparison. But anyway, as I say, Leclerc has had a solid season all things considered, and whilst he's struggled, Hamilton knows how a championship-winning team should operate and has a huge amount of experience in that area. I may well be looking at this far too simplistically, it wouldn't be the first time, but maybe rather than telling the drivers to keep quiet, Elkann should perhaps try listening to them for a change. It's just a thought. This whole thing smacks of a warning, frankly, and ask Alain Prost what happens when you get too publicly critical of Ferrari. I'm not saying we're at that stage yet, but they do like their drivers to very much stay in their lane and not rock the boat too much. But we live in a very different world now where that old school approach maybe isn't going to work. Because as soon as these drivers hop out of the car following another disastrous session, a microphone is more or less immediately shoved in their faces and they're expected to deal with the same questions about the same problems. There is only so much biting of the tongue any driver can do. He did have a bit more to say, and when speaking about the manufacturer's success in the World Endurance Championship, which has, by the way, balance of performance regulations that teams aren't universally big fans of, so comparing that to Formula One is not totally reasonable, Elkann also said that, quote, winning both as manufacturers and as drivers is a wonderful demonstration that when Ferrari is united, when everyone is together, great things can be achieved. Essentially, unity. And do you know what? I actually agree with him, but that line also adds to the feeling that he is issuing some sort of warning with these comments. And how the team performs with the new 2026 regulations is going to be critical, because if this continues and based on what he's saying, he may well feel that he has no choice but to act in the future. However, I have a warning of my own, not that he'll be listening, of course, but still. Since the team last won the Drivers' Championship in 2007 and the Constructors in 2008, they have employed drivers including double world champion Fernando Alonso, four-time world champion Sebastian Vettel, and now seven-time world champion Lewis Hamilton. They have made their way through a good number of team principals, including Stefano Domenicali, Marco Mattiacci, Maurizio Arriva-Bene, Mattia Binotto, and Frederic Vasseur, who, despite the public backing, has been under pressure pretty much all year. My point being, perhaps the issue is far deeper than the drivers and the team bosses, so maybe it's time Ferrari started to look at itself and find where the real problems lie. Because that list of drivers doesn't strike me as being the biggest issue, and so sacking them and Vasseur isn't going to solve the issues. As an example, if you put Max Verstappen in that team, I am fairly confident he will eventually find the same problems waiting for him that Alonso, Vettel and co had to endure. Now, to be clear, nowhere has Elkann said he is planning on sacking anyone. I understand that it's never going to go down well with the higher-ups and sponsors if drivers are so vocal about their frustrations, and that can impact team morale as well. But the drivers are also part of the team, and their morale has been taking a kicking too. They aren't complaining for the sake of it, they are frustrated and don't seem to feel like they are being listened to. But when quotes like that start to come out publicly from the very top of the company or the team, it hardly shows unity behind the scenes, and that often only goes one way. What I will add, though, is that he needs to be very careful. After all, he is the one who publicly backed Fred Vasseur and also went chasing Lewis Hamilton and is responsible for a lot of the recent changes at the team. If he feels all of that has played a part in the recent failings at Maranello, then maybe his position shouldn't be safe either. Real change has to come from the top rather than just going round and round in circles and repeating the same knee-jerk mistakes from the last decade plus. What now, though, for the team? Well, P2 in the Constructors is still a possibility despite a poor weekend at Interlagos, so that has got to be the team's goal between now and the end of the year. It's going to be tough though, especially with Verstappen scoring heavily for Red Bull and Mercedes on form, but they have to give it everything they've got. In the slightly shorter term, though, these comments from Elkann will mean that the first thing Vasseur, Leclerc and Hamilton will have to do in Vegas is face and answer some very difficult questions which will get their weekend off to an uncomfortable start. If, as is reported, the idea of making these comments was a criticise to inspire type of approach, then I'd say, quite frankly, it's been a bit of a misfire. We'll find out for sure how the drivers react next week, and hey, it may have worked, you never know. But really, all eyes are on 2026. We have a massive rules change coming in, and whilst getting the aero changes right will be hugely important too, there are also big power unit changes coming in, and that is an opportunity for Ferrari to steal a march on its rivals. That is going to be where the real test is for the engineers and Fred Vasseur, and if all that goes to plan, then all of this talk and the apparent warnings will very quickly evaporate. Get it wrong though, and you can bet your backside that Elkann will be quick to act, and maybe, as I've already mentioned, his quotes this week are him laying the groundwork for any potential changes he may need to make quickly. As for the drivers, there is some talk that these comments were directed at a specific driver, some saying Leclerc, others saying Hamilton, but I don't really agree. It felt to me like a blanket statement aimed at both. And do you know what? He is sort of right in the sense that they need to get their heads down between now and the end of the season and focus on bringing home the best results they can by hopefully extracting the maximum from whatever car they are given. That is, after all, a big part of a driver's job. But if things carry on the way they are, I would not blame them if they continue to speak out, frankly. And I can't imagine either of them will be sticking around much longer if next season turns out to be a disaster. But that is a conversation for another day. That is it for this cry for help, ramble, waffle thing from a Ferrari fan then. But let me know down in the comments what you made of John Elkann's words this week. And on your way down there, please do leave a like on the video and consider subscribing too so you don't miss any future videos or streams. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Formula Sean, and until next time, goodbye.